My name is Serena, and I am 28 years old. Last Christmas, my father looked me straight in the eye and said I brought nothing to our family table. Those words shattered something inside me that had been cracking for years. What he did not know was that I had been secretly supporting our family business for the past 5 years, keeping us afloat while he took all the credit. But the real bombshell, I was not even his biological daughter, and he had known all along. Before we dive into this family revenge story that changed everything, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more jaw-dropping family drama stories. Trust me, you will not believe what happens next when family loyalty gets turned completely upside down. Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out in the Morrison family. My two brothers, Jake and Marcus, had my father's piercing blue eyes and sharp jawline, while I inherited what I thought were my mother's softer features and hazel eyes. Dad always seemed to favor them, giving them opportunities in his construction company, while relegating me to filing papers and answering phones despite my business degree from Northwestern University. For 5 years, I had been working behind the scenes using my finance background to restructure our failing family business. Morrison Construction was hemorrhaging money due to poor management decisions and outdated practices. While Dad boasted about his success at family gatherings, I was the one staying up until 3 in the morning renegotiating contracts with suppliers, implementing cost-cutting measures, and securing new clients through strategic marketing campaigns he knew nothing about. I had created dummy consulting firms to hide my involvement, knowing Dad's pride would never allow him to accept help from his daughter. The irony was not lost on me that the man who constantly told me I was not smart enough to understand business was being saved by my expertise month after month. Every financial report he proudly presented to the family was actually my work, carefully crafted to make him look like the brilliant businessman he claimed to be. The Christmas dinner that changed everything started like any other family gathering. Mom had prepared her famous honey-glazed ham. The dining room was decorated with twinkling lights, and everyone was sharing updates about their lives. Jake announced his promotion at his law firm. Marcus talked about his new house purchase, and when it came to my turn, I mentioned a small freelance consulting project I had been working on. That was when Dad's expression shifted. His face darkened as he set down his fork with deliberate force. The entire table fell silent as he leaned back in his chair, studying me with those cold blue eyes that had intimidated me since childhood. Consulting, he scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. What could you possibly consult about, Serena? You have never built anything meaningful in your life. You bounce from one little project to another, never committing to anything substantial. The words hit me like physical blows, but I remained composed. Actually, Dad, my consulting work has been quite successful. I have helped several small businesses increase their profitability by— He cut me off with a harsh laugh. Profitability. You talk about business like you understand it, but you have never had real responsibility. You have never had to make the hard decisions that keep a company alive. He gestured around the table at my brothers. Look at your brothers. Jake is a partner at his firm. Marcus is buying real estate. They contribute something tangible to this world. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Mom was staring at her plate, and my brothers were exchanging uncomfortable glances. I felt my cheeks burning with humiliation, but something deeper was building inside me. A cold fury I had never experienced before. Dad was not finished. He stood up slowly, his 6-foot frame towering over the table as he delivered what he must have thought was the final blow. The truth is, Serena, you bring nothing to this table, nothing to this family. You are 28 years old, and what do you have to show for it? A handful of part-time consulting gigs and a rented apartment. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked around the table at the faces of people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. Mom was still avoiding eye contact, Jake was studying his wine glass intensely, and Marcus was shifting uncomfortably in his chair. None of them said a word in my defense. Something crystallized in that moment. Years of feeling lesser than years of having my accomplishments dismissed. Years of being treated like the family disappointment. Despite literally keeping their precious business afloat, it all came rushing back. But instead of crying or arguing, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I stood up slowly, matching Dad's energy. "You know what, Dad? You are absolutely right." My voice was steady, controlled. "I do not bring anything to this table anymore." I walked to the coat closet with measured steps, grabbed my purse and jacket, and headed toward the door. Behind me, I could hear Mom calling my name and Jake saying something about not leaving angry, but I did not turn around. As I reached for the door handle, I paused and looked back at Dad one last time. "I hope you are prepared for what bringing nothing to the table actually looks like." That night, I sat in my apartment with a bottle of wine and my laptop staring at the financial documents that proved I had been the backbone of Morrison Construction for years. The consulting firms I had created, the contracts I had secured, the debts I had restructured, all of it tied back to me. Dad had no idea that his business success was entirely dependent on the daughter he had just publicly humiliated. But as I scrolled through email after email of correspondence with suppliers, clients, and financial institutions, something else caught my attention. A DNA testing kit I had ordered months earlier was sitting unopened on my coffee table. I had bought it out of curiosity, thinking it would be fun to learn more about our family heritage. Little did I know that this innocent little box would reveal the most devastating secret of all. One that would turn my father's words about bringing nothing to the family table into the most ironic statement he had ever made. Because as it turned out, I was not even part of his family to begin with. 3 weeks after that disastrous Christmas dinner, the DNA results arrived. I had almost forgotten about the test too, consumed with planning my next moves regarding the business situation. When the email notification pinged on my phone, I expected to see some interesting European ancestry or maybe a distant cousin connection. What I found instead made me drop my coffee mug on the kitchen floor. According to the results, I shared no genetic markers with Jake or Marcus Morrison. 0. Not even distant cousins. The test had also connected me with several potential relatives on the platform, none of whom carried the Morrison name. My closest genetic match was a woman named Patricia Chen living in San Francisco, showing up as a potential aunt or grandmother. I sat there staring at the screen for what felt like hours, my mind racing through 28 years of family interactions with this new lens. Every dismissive comment from Dad, every time he had treated me differently than my brothers, every instance where I felt like an outsider in my own family. It all suddenly made horrible sense. But the most chilling realization was that Dad had to have known. The way he had always been careful to specify your mother's daughter when introducing me to business associates. The way he had never included me in any legal documents related to the family business, even though my brothers had been named as future inheritors since they turned 18. The way he had always been just a little too quick to dismiss my opinions and contributions. I spent the next 2 days in a strange state of emotional numbness, mechanically going through my routine while processing this information. Part of me wanted to confront Mom immediately, but another part of me knew I needed to be strategic about this. If I was going to blow up my entire family dynamic, I needed to be prepared for the fallout. That Friday evening, I finally worked up the courage to call Patricia Chen. Her voice was warm and slightly confused when she answered. "Hello, this is Patricia." "Hi, Miss Chen. This is going to sound strange, but my name is Serena Morrison, and according to a DNA test, we might be related. You showed up as a close relative match." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Morrison? Did you say Morrison? Oh my God. What is your mother's name, sweetheart?" "Linda Morrison, but her maiden name was Chen." I heard Patricia's sharp intake of breath. "Linda Chen. My little sister Linda. I have been looking for her for 30 years. The conversation that followed was the most surreal hour of my life. Patricia explained that my mother had disappeared when I was a baby, cutting off all contact with their family after some kind of argument with their parents. She had tried for years to find Linda, but had no idea she had married someone named Morrison, or where she had ended up. "Your mother was always headstrong," Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion. "Our parents wanted her to marry someone from our community, but she fell in love with this white guy who worked construction. When she got pregnant with you, there was a huge fight. Our father said some terrible things about mixed-race children not belonging anywhere. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. Mom had run away with her boyfriend, but somewhere along the line that relationship had ended and she had found Dad. Only Dad was not my biological father. He was just the man who had chosen to raise another man's child. Patricia, I said, carefully, do you know anything about my biological father? Another pause. I met him once briefly when Linda brought him home. Nice guy, actually. He was studying architecture at the time, had big dreams about designing sustainable buildings. His name was David. David, something with a K. Kingston. No, that is not right. Do you remember anything else about him? He had these intense green eyes and he was passionate about environmental construction. Linda was crazy about him. I always wondered what happened between them. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, feeling like my entire identity had been reconstructed in a single phone call. I was not Serena Morrison, disappointing daughter of a construction company owner. I was Serena Chen, daughter of Linda Chen, and some mysterious architect named David who cared about sustainable building practices. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just about the lies, but about the systematic way I had been excluded and diminished. Dad had known I was not his biological child, but he had chosen to keep me around while making sure I understood my place in the family hierarchy. He had let me work my ass off to save his business while simultaneously telling me I brought nothing to the table. The next morning I called in sick to work and spent the day creating what I privately called Operation Revelation. I started by documenting everything I had done for Morrison Construction over the past 5 years. Every contract I had secured, every debt I had restructured, every cost-saving measure I had implemented. I gathered emails, financial records, and phone logs that proved my consulting firms were directly responsible for the company's turnaround. Then I did something that felt both terrifying and liberating. I started the process of legally changing my name. If I brought nothing to the Morrison table, then perhaps it was time to find my own table. Serena Chen had a nice ring to it. I also began reaching out to Patricia's contacts in San Francisco, slowly building a picture of the family I had never known existed. Turns out the Chens were a tight-knit group of entrepreneurs and professionals who owned several small businesses throughout the Bay Area. They had been wondering about their missing sister Linda for decades and were overjoyed to learn about my existence. But the most important part of my plan was the timeline. I would continue managing Morrison Construction from behind the scenes for exactly 90 days, giving Dad enough time to really appreciate what it felt like when I truly brought nothing to his table. On day 91, I would reveal everything: the truth about my parentage, the extent of my business contributions, and my decision to legally become Serena Chen. I wanted him to experience the full weight of his words about me bringing nothing to the family before he learned that I had never actually been family at all. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. For years I had been the invisible hand, keeping Morrison Construction profitable, working through shell companies and carefully orchestrated scenarios to make Dad look like a business genius. Now I would simply stop. The first domino fell on February 15th. I had been personally managing the relationship with Westfield Developments, our biggest client, worth roughly 40% of our annual revenue. They had been growing increasingly frustrated with Dad's outdated project management approach, and were only staying because of the innovative solutions I had been providing through my consulting firm, Strategic Solutions, LLC. I scheduled a final meeting with their project manager, Janet Rodriguez, under the pretense of Strategic Solutions reviewing their partnership with Morrison Construction. Janet and I had developed a solid working relationship over the past 2 years, though she had no idea I was actually a Morrison. "I have to be honest with you, Serena," Janet said as we sat in her downtown office overlooking the harbor. "We have been questioning whether Morrison Construction is the right fit for our upcoming projects. The owner seems stuck in the past, and frankly, his communication style is becoming problematic." I nodded sympathetically. "What specific concerns do you have?" "Well, he still insists on doing everything through phone calls and handwritten notes. He does not seem to understand digital project management or sustainable building practices. The only reason we have stayed is because of the excellent strategic consulting work you have provided. Your recommendations have saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars. I appreciate that feedback, Janet. Unfortunately, I have to let you know that Strategic Solutions will be ending our relationship with Morrison Construction at the end of this month. Her face fell. Oh no. Can I ask why? Let us just say our professional values are no longer aligned with theirs. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was calculating exactly how this conversation would play out when Dad realized his biggest client was about to walk. The second phase involved my relationship with First National Bank. Dad had no idea that I had been personally guaranteeing Morrison Construction's line of credit through a complex financial arrangement I had set up using my own assets as collateral. The company's cash flow was heavily dependent on this credit line to cover payroll during slower months. I made an appointment with our loan officer, Mr. Harrison, to discuss restructuring the guarantee arrangement due to changing personal circumstances. Harrison had always been impressed with the financial documentation I provided and had no reason to question my decision to withdraw my personal guarantee. "Are you sure about this, Miss Morrison?" he asked, reviewing the paperwork. "This will significantly impact the company's available credit." "I am completely sure. My personal financial goals are shifting and I can no longer maintain this level of exposure. Will someone else in the Morrison family be taking over the guarantee?" I almost smiled. "I doubt it. You will need to discuss alternative arrangements directly with the business owner." The third element of my plan involved the 3 smaller construction companies I had been helping Dad compete with through strategic underpricing and superior project proposals. I had been feeding Morrison Construction inside information about their bidding strategies, while simultaneously making them more efficient and profitable. It was a delicate balance that had kept Morrison ahead of the competition for years. I scheduled lunch meetings with the owners of all 3 companies, Mike Torres of Torres Family Construction, Sarah Kim of Metropolitan Builders, and Robert Jackson of Jackson & Associates. Each of them knew me as an independent consultant who had occasionally provided competitive intelligence. "I wanted to give you a heads up," I told Mike during our lunch at his favorite Italian restaurant. "Morrison Construction is about to lose their strategic consulting support. They will likely be bidding blind on projects for the first time in years." Mike raised his eyebrows. "Really, they have seemed so sharp lately. Their bids have been consistently competitive, and their project proposals have been top-notch. That was mostly due to external consulting support that is ending this month. I thought you should know because there will probably be some interesting opportunities opening up in the market." I had similar conversations with Sarah and Robert, carefully planting seeds that would bloom into serious competitive pressure for Dad just as his other support systems were crumbling. Meanwhile, I was building my real family connections in San Francisco. Patricia had introduced me to my cousin Daniel Chen, who owned a successful green architecture firm, and my Aunt Susan, who ran a sustainable building materials company. The parallels to my own interests were not lost on me. Apparently, environmental consciousness ran in my actual family. During my first video call with Daniel, I was struck by how much we looked alike. We both had the same hazel eyes and similar facial structure features I had never shared with anyone in the Morrison family. "It is incredible to finally meet you, Serena," Daniel said, his enthusiasm genuine. "Aunt Patricia has been showing your photo to everyone. We are all so excited to have you back in the family." "Back in the family," I repeated. "That is the first time anyone has ever said those words to me. Well, you were always part of our family. We just did not know where you were." Daniel paused. "Patricia mentioned you work in business consulting. We could actually use someone with your skills. Our company is growing fast, but we need help with financial planning and strategic development." The irony was perfect. While Dad insisted I brought nothing valuable to any table, my actual family was eager to benefit from my expertise. Daniel offered me a consulting contract that would pay more than I had ever made working for Morrison Construction, even including all my secret shell company earnings. But the most satisfying development was my growing relationship with Mom's sister, Patricia. We talked on the phone almost every day, and she was helping me piece together the story of my early childhood. Your mother was such a bright girl, Patricia told me during one of our evening conversations. She got excellent grades, spoke 3 languages, and had this incredible head for numbers. Our parents wanted her to become a doctor or lawyer, but she fell in love with this dreamy architect who talked about building houses that worked with nature instead of against it. Do you think she was happy? With Dad, I mean with the man who raised me. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I think your mother made the best choice she could at the time. When things ended with your biological father, she was a young single mother with no family support. William Morrison offered stability and a father figure for you, but I always wondered if she gave up too much of herself to make that work. These conversations were giving me a new perspective on Mom's behavior over the years. Her quiet acceptance of Dad's dismissive treatment, her reluctance to challenge his decisions about the business, her insistence that I should be grateful for the opportunities he provided. It all made sense now. She had been protecting a secret that affected all of our lives. By early March, the pressure was starting to show at Morrison Construction. Dad had called me twice asking if I knew why Westfield Developments was being difficult about their upcoming projects. The bank had contacted him about restructuring the credit line, and he was confused about why their requirements had suddenly become more stringent. I played innocent during these conversations, offering vague sympathy and generic advice about customer relations and financial management. Each phone call was more frustrating than the last for him as he realized he could not solve these problems with his usual combination of charm and bluster. The stage was set for the final act of my revenge. Dad was about to learn what it really meant when someone who brought nothing to the table decided to take their nothing elsewhere. But first, he was going to experience the full consequences of building his success on the back of a daughter he had never truly valued. The best part, he still had no idea what was coming. By April 1st, Morrison Construction was in free fall and Dad still had no idea why. Westfield Developments had officially terminated their contract, citing fundamental disagreements about project management philosophy and communication standards. The bank had reduced their credit line by 60%, after my personal guarantee was removed. 3 major bids had been lost to competitors who seemed to have inside information about Morrison's weaknesses. Dad was working 16-hour days trying to figure out what had gone wrong. I watched from a distance as he grew increasingly frantic, calling emergency meetings with his remaining staff and staying at the office until midnight, reviewing contracts and financial statements he could not fully understand. The breaking point came when he called me on a Thursday evening, his voice strained and desperate in a way I had never heard before. "Serena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course, Dad." "What is going on? Have you heard anything in your consulting work about companies having problems with Morrison Construction? Any rumors or industry gossip that might explain why we are suddenly losing clients?" I paused for exactly the right amount of time, letting him think I was considering the question seriously. "Actually, now that you mention it, I did hear something interesting at a networking event last week." "What? What did you hear?" "Well, I was talking to some people in the construction industry, and someone mentioned that Morrison Construction had been getting an unfair advantage for years because of some kind of external consulting support. But apparently that support had been withdrawn, and now the company was struggling to compete on its own merits." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "External consulting support," Dad's voice was barely a whisper. "That is just what I heard. Something about strategic planning and financial management that was keeping the company profitable. But like I said, it is just industry gossip. I am sure it is not accurate." When he hung up without saying goodbye, I knew he was starting to piece things together, but he still had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. 2 days later, I received the call I had been waiting for. Dad wanted to meet for lunch, just the 2 of us, to discuss some family business matters. We met at his favorite steakhouse downtown, the same place where he used to take potential clients to impress them with his supposed business acumen. He looked terrible. His usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he had not been sleeping well. "Serena, I am going to ask you a direct question and I need a direct answer. His voice was controlled, but I could see his hands shaking slightly as he reached for his water glass. Okay. Have you been involved in any consulting work for Morrison Construction, either directly or indirectly? I looked him straight in the eye the same way he had looked at me that Christmas night, when he told me I brought nothing to the table. Why would you ask that? Because I have been doing some digging and there are some financial arrangements and consulting contracts that I cannot account for. Strategic Solutions LLC, Pinnacle Business Services, Chen Consulting Group. These companies have all worked with Morrison Construction over the past 5 years, but I never hired them. He had found my shell companies. I felt a surge of satisfaction that he had been thorough enough to trace the connections, but also a cold determination to finish what I had started. Dad, are you suggesting that I have been secretly running consulting companies without your knowledge? I am not suggesting anything. I am asking directly. Have you been involved in managing Morrison Construction through outside consulting firms? I took a sip of my wine, letting the tension build. You know what, Dad? You are absolutely right. I have been running those consulting companies. For 5 years, I have been the one keeping Morrison Construction profitable. His face went white. What? Every major contract you thought you won through your brilliant salesmanship, I secured those. Every financial crisis you thought you solved through your business instincts, I restructured those debts. Every competitive advantage you thought you had earned through your experience, I provided the strategic intelligence that made it possible. Dad stared at me in complete shock, his mouth slightly open. But here is the really interesting part, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. 3 months ago you told me I brought nothing to your table, so I decided to find out what would happen if I actually brought nothing. If I stopped all my consulting work and let Morrison Construction stand on its own merits. You deliberately sabotaged my business. No, Dad, I just stopped carrying you. There is a difference. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. Why? Why would you do this to our family? That was my cue for the final revelation. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder containing the DNA test results, the correspondence with Patricia Chen, and the legal name change documents. Funny you should mention family, I said, sliding the folder across the table, because it turns out we are not actually family at all. He opened the folder with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the DNA results and the family tree that showed no genetic connection between us. When he looked up, his face had gone from white to gray. You knew, did you not? I asked quietly. You have always known I was not your biological daughter. His silence was answer enough. How long have you known, Dad? When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet I had to lean forward to hear him. Since you were 2 years old. Your mother told me when we got serious about marriage. She said your biological father had abandoned both of you and she needed someone who would love you like his own daughter. And did you love me like your own daughter? He could not meet my eyes. I tried. I really tried. But every time I looked at you, I saw him. I saw the man who had your mother first. And every time you succeeded at something, every time you were smart or capable, I wondered if you were becoming like him instead of like me. The admission hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. Everything I had suspected about his treatment of me was confirmed in that moment. I had not been his disappointing daughter. I had been a constant reminder of his own insecurities and inadequacies. Well, Dad, I have some good news for you, I said, standing up from the table. You will never have to wonder about that again. Because I am legally changing my name to Serena Chen and I will not be bringing nothing to your table anymore. I will not be bringing anything to your table anymore. I left him sitting there with the DNA results and walked out of the restaurant feeling lighter than I had felt in 28 years. The fallout from my lunch with Dad was swift and devastating. Within 24 hours, he had apparently gone home and confronted Mom about the DNA results and everything I had revealed about the business. According to Jake, who called me in a panic the next evening, there had been screaming matches, thrown objects, and threats of divorce. Serena, what the hell did you do? Jake demanded over the phone. Dad is saying you have been sabotaging the family business for months, and Mom is crying nonstop. Marcus is talking about getting lawyers involved. I told Dad the truth, I replied calmly, both about the business and about our family relationships. Did he mention the DNA results to you? There was a pause. What DNA results? Of course. Dad would not want to admit to Jake and Marcus that their sister was not actually their sister, especially not when it revealed his own deception and insecurity. He was probably trying to frame the entire situation as me being vindictive and unstable, rather than acknowledging the systematic way he had excluded and diminished me. Jake, I think you should ask Dad to show you the contents of the folder I gave him yesterday. There are some things about our family that you and Marcus deserve to know. Stop being cryptic, Serena. Just tell me what is going on. But I was done explaining myself to people who had watched me be mistreated for years without saying a word. Ask Dad to show you the folder. Then call me back if you want to have a real conversation. I hung up and turned off my phone, knowing that the next few days would be chaotic as the truth spread through the Morrison family network. I had appointments scheduled with a therapist and a lawyer to help me process everything that was happening and protect myself legally from any potential retaliation. The business consequences were even more dramatic than I had anticipated. Without my consulting support and with the truth about his incompetence becoming clear, Dad was facing bankruptcy within weeks. The remaining clients had started demanding answers about missed deadlines and budget overruns that he could not explain or fix. 3 of his key employees had quit when their paychecks started bouncing. But the most satisfying development was the industry response. Word was spreading through the construction community that Morrison Construction's recent success had been artificially inflated by external consulting support. Competitors who had been struggling to match Morrison's bids were realizing they had been fighting against insider information and strategic advantages they could never have overcome honestly. Sarah Kim from Metropolitan Builders called me personally to express her appreciation for the heads-up I had given her. Serena, I do not know how you knew Morrison Construction was about to collapse, but your warning gave us time to position ourselves perfectly. We just won 3 major contracts that would have gone to Morrison under normal circumstances. I am glad I could help level the playing field, I told her. Actually, we have been so impressed with your market insights that we would like to offer you a consulting contract. Are you available for new clients? This was happening with all 3 of the competitors I had spoken to earlier. My consulting business was about to become much more profitable and legitimate than it had ever been when I was secretly propping up Dad's failing company. Meanwhile, my relationship with the Chen family in San Francisco was flourishing. Patricia had invited me to visit for a long weekend and I had accepted. The contrast between their warm, inclusive family dynamic and the cold hierarchy I had grown up with was startling. During my first family dinner with the Chens, Patricia's daughter Amy asked about my work, and when I explained my business consulting background, the entire table erupted in excited conversation about potential collaboration, opportunities. Uncle Robert needed help with his restaurant expansion plans. Cousin Daniel wanted to discuss sustainable construction consulting, and Aunt Susan was launching a new product line that could benefit from my strategic planning expertise. We have been needing someone with your skills for years, Uncle Robert said enthusiastically. It is like the universe sent you back to us at exactly the right time. The phrase "sent you back to us" hit me emotionally in a way I had not expected. For the first time in my life, I was sitting at a table where my contributions were valued, where my expertise was appreciated, and where I belonged without having to prove myself constantly. But the most meaningful moment came when Patricia pulled me aside after dinner to show me photo albums from my mother's childhood. There were pictures of Linda Chen as a bright, confident teenager, graduation photos from high school, where she was valedictorian, and images of her winning academic awards and scholarships. Your mother was brilliant, Patricia said softly. She could have done anything she wanted with her life. I think she gave up more than she realized when she chose stability over following her dreams. Looking at those photos, I could see myself in my mother's young face, in ways I had never been able to see myself in any Morrison family pictures. The intelligence in her eyes, the determined set of her shoulders, the way she carried herself with confidence. It was like looking at a genetic blueprint for who I was meant to become. Back in Chicago, the Morrison family drama was reaching its crescendo. Mom had finally called me, her voice weak and defeated in a way that broke my heart despite everything that had happened. "Serena, sweetheart, I know you are angry and you have every right to be. But please, can we talk? There are things you need to understand about the choices I made." We met for coffee at a neutral location, a small cafe near her office where we could talk privately. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the past week, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and her eyes red from crying. "I never meant for you to find out this way," she said, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like she was trying to absorb its warmth. "I thought if I never said anything, if we just lived like a normal family, it would be better for everyone." "Better for who, Mom? It certainly was not better for me. I know that now. But 26 years ago, I was a scared young woman with a baby and no family support. Your biological father, David. He was not ready to be a parent. When I told him I was pregnant, he panicked and said he needed time to figure things out. That time turned into weeks, then months. So you found Dad." "William was kind to me when I needed kindness. He offered to marry me and give you his name. He promised to love you like his own daughter." Her voice broke. "I thought I was giving you stability and a father figure. I did not realize that his resentment would grow over the years." As I sat there listening to her explain the impossible choices she had made as a young mother, I felt my anger toward her beginning to soften. She had been trying to protect me in the only way she knew how, even if the result had been years of emotional damage. But my anger toward Dad remained as sharp as ever. He had chosen to take on the responsibility of raising me, and then he had spent 28 years punishing me for not being his biological child, while benefiting from my efforts to save his business. The reckoning was not over. It was just beginning. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office in San Francisco looking out at the Golden Gate Bridge and reviewing contracts for Chen Strategic Consulting. The name change had become official. My business was thriving with clients who valued my expertise, and I was surrounded by a family who celebrated my successes instead of diminishing them. Morrison Construction had filed for bankruptcy in June. Dad had tried desperately to save the company by reaching out to former clients and promising to match any competitor's prices, but the damage to his reputation was irreversible. The industry had lost confidence in his ability to deliver projects on time and within budget, without the strategic support he had been receiving unknowingly for years. Jake had called me in July after he and Marcus finally learned the full truth about my parentage and my role in keeping the family business afloat. His tone was completely different from our last conversation, humbled, apologetic, and genuinely remorseful. "Serena, I owe you an apology that is probably 5 years overdue," he said. "I had no idea what you were doing for the family business, and I should have stood up for you when Dad was treating you badly." "Why did you not?" I asked, genuinely curious. Honestly, because it was easier to go along with his narrative if he were not contributing much. It meant I did not have to examine my own privilege and question why I was getting opportunities he did not. His voice was thick with regret. "I was a coward, and I am sorry." Marcus had reached out separately with a similar apology, acknowledging that he had benefited from Dad's favoritism, while watching me be systematically excluded from family opportunities. Both of my brothers had offered to testify on my behalf if Dad tried to pursue any legal action against me, though his lawyers had quickly advised him that he had no grounds for a case. The most significant development had been my relationship with Mom. After several months of therapy, both individual and family sessions, we had been able to rebuild our connection on a foundation of honesty rather than secrets. She had filed for divorce from Dad and was planning to move to San Francisco to be closer to her sisters and me. "I spent 26 years trying to protect a secret that ended up hurting you anyway," she told me during one of our therapy sessions. "I should have been honest from the beginning and trusted you to handle the truth." "We cannot change the past, Mom," I replied, "but we can choose how we move forward." She had also helped me connect with information about my biological father. David Kingston had indeed become a successful sustainable architect, specializing in eco-friendly residential developments throughout the Pacific Northwest. When I finally worked up the courage to contact him, his response was immediate and enthusiastic. Serena, I have thought about you and your mother every single day for 28 years, he said during our first phone call. I was young and scared when Linda told me she was pregnant, and I made the biggest mistake of my life by not fighting for both of you. We had met in person the following month, and the connection was undeniable. We shared the same passion for environmental sustainability, the same analytical approach to problem solving, and the same dry sense of humor. He had never married or had other children, dedicating his career to building the kind of innovative, sustainable homes he had dreamed about in college. I would love to collaborate with you on some projects, he told me during our second meeting. Your business expertise combined with my architectural background could create something really special. We were now working together on a sustainable housing development in Marin County, combining his innovative design concepts with my strategic planning and financial management skills. It felt like coming full circle. The daughter he had never known was helping him achieve the dreams he had postponed for nearly 3 decades. But perhaps the most satisfying moment of vindication had come in October when Sarah Kim offered me a partnership in Metropolitan Builders. The company had grown exponentially after winning the contracts that Morrison Construction could no longer handle competently, and they needed someone with my strategic expertise to manage their expansion. You understand this industry better than anyone I have ever worked with, Sarah told me during our negotiation meeting. We want you to become a full partner and help us build the most innovative, sustainable construction company in the Midwest. I accepted the partnership, but maintained my San Francisco residence, splitting my time between both cities and building the kind of diverse, challenging career I had always dreamed of having. Chen's strategic consulting was handling clients throughout California, while my partnership with Metropolitan Builders was revolutionizing construction practices in Chicago. The final piece of poetic justice came when Dad reached out to me in November, asking if I would consider consulting for a new construction venture he was planning to launch after his bankruptcy proceedings were complete. I know I have no right to ask, he said during our brief phone conversation, but you are the most talented business strategist I have ever encountered. I realize now how much I took your contributions for granted. The irony was delicious. The man who had told me I brought nothing to his table was now begging for my expertise to save his career. But instead of gloating, I felt only a profound sense of closure. I appreciate the acknowledgement, William, I said, deliberately using his first name, instead of calling him Dad. But I am committed to building businesses that align with my values, and unfortunately, we do not share the same professional or personal ethics. When I hung up that phone, I felt the last traces of anger and resentment finally leave my body. I had not just gotten revenge on the man who had diminished me for 28 years. I had built a completely new life that proved his assessment of my value was fundamentally wrong. As I write this story, I am preparing for Christmas dinner with the Chen family, my first holiday celebration as Serena Chen, rather than Serena Morrison. Patricia is cooking her famous dumplings, Daniel is bringing his latest sustainable building designs to show everyone, and Mom will be joining us as Linda Chen, reclaiming the identity she had hidden for decades. The contrast with last Christmas could not be more dramatic. Instead of being told I bring nothing to the table, I will be surrounded by people who celebrate my contributions and value my presence. Instead of feeling like an outsider in my own family, I will be home with people who share my DNA, my values, and my dreams for the future. Sometimes the best revenge is not just proving someone wrong about your worth. It is discovering that you never needed their validation in the first place. I spent 28 years trying to earn a place at a table where I would never truly belong, when my real family was waiting for me at a different table altogether. Looking back, I am almost grateful for Dad's cruel words that Christmas night. If he had not pushed me to that breaking point, I might never have had the courage to search for my real identity and claim my authentic life. His rejection became the catalyst for my liberation. And that, my friends, is the sweetest justice of all. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a family betrayal that completely changed your perspective on who you really are? Have you experienced that moment when someone's cruelty actually ended up setting you free? Drop your stories in the comments below, because I know I am not the only one who has had to rebuild their entire identity after discovering family secrets. And hey, if this story of family karma and justice served resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who needs to hear that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming who you were always meant to be. Do not forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and finding your authentic path. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember, when someone tells you that you bring nothing to their table, maybe it is time to find your own table, where your worth is never questioned. Until next time, keep choosing the family that chooses you back.